everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Sketchy Legends. Today we're going to step away from the conspiracy train and back into the world of urban legends and discuss a creature that seems to be wreaking havoc all around the world. If you're ready to hear more, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's Sketchy Legend. In a small town, it's almost impossible to hide anything. Everyone seems to know everybody else's business, and they know who to tell their kids to stay away from, and they always seem to know where others hide their skeletons. However, when a small town comes under attack from something they've never seen before, they can unite to search for the cause. Early in the morning of a seemingly average March day in 1995 in Puerto Rico, a sheep herder woke up to start his day. He exited his home and started across the field toward his flock, but noticed that they had all appeared to be asleep, which seemed quite odd for this time of the day. As he quickly approached his resting sheep, he realized that something was terribly wrong. 8 of his sheep weren't sleeping, but have in fact been killed. The reason he hadn't noticed sooner was that nothing appeared to be wrong with their bodies. It wasn't obvious that they had been attacked from a distance. There were no bite marks, and all the flesh was still on their bodies, and there was little blood to be seen on the ground. In fact, there was hardly any blood on the bodies at all. The only physical thing he could find were 3 small, round puncture wounds on their chest, and that every single sheep had been drained of their blood. The legend of the Chupacabra, a name that literally translates to goat sucker, is one that is fairly young, to my surprise. It was actually younger than I am. I had heard about it a few times throughout the last couple of years, but had always assumed that it was a monster story that was lumped into the category with creatures like the Loch Ness Monster. I figured the tale of this terrifying livestock-slaying creature had been tormenting the southern United States, Mexico, and Puerto Rico for far longer than almost 30 years, but I was wrong. Later in 1995, there had been more attacks that had taken out far more than just 8 sheep. In fact, it was reported that in the town of Canavanas, Puerto Rico, that there were as many as 150 killings of livestock and pets that were similar to that of what happened to the sheep. The first reported sightings of the Chupacabra came from a woman named Madeline Tolentino, who was given the most recognizable description of the creature. It was said to be anywhere from 5 to 6 feet tall, walking on its back 2 legs. Its dry and scaly skin had a green-gray hue to it, almost reptilian. There were spikes that traveled down the back of its head to the base of its tail. And lastly, it had long, sharp teeth. This seems to be the more common description of the creature. However, they do vary at times. Usually, it's described as bipedal, but sometimes it walks on all 4s. Usually, it's stocky and thick, but other times it's described to be thin and emaciated. The only thing that these described creatures seem to have in common is their diet. While sightings of these beasts have typically stayed in Mexico, Texas, New Mexico, and Puerto Rico, they have seemed to have spread over the years through the 2010s. There had been reports made and posts made online about a spiny-backed livestock-killing animal in places such as Russia and the Philippines, having all the telltale signs of the Chupacabra. Soon after that, reports in the northern United States, such as Maine, and in South America, such as Chile, started to bubble to the surface. With the popularity of the Chupacabra making it into the mainstream media, one man dove deep into investigating this suspicious creature. Benjamin Radford, a science-based urban legend and paranormal investigator, became curious about the cases of the livestock being sucked dry of their blood. He describes himself as a skeptic looking to find the truth behind hauntings and urban legends. From all the sightings but lack of real evidence of the Chupacabra, Radford was ready to lump it into the same category as Bigfoot, but he decided to put all of his initial thoughts aside to investigate further. Reports coming from seemingly average people who don't usually put stock in urban legends and conspiracy theories, were describing this alien-like creature, people that Radford would usually deem believable, but he never just relies on the word of other people. He had discovered the description of the creature varied greatly between locations, so he needed to find the source of the first description. He tracked it back to that 1995 eyewitness, Madeline Tolentino, and spoke to her. He wanted to know more about her and not just about her sighting. He believes that everyday occurrences can be affected by how we see things, especially when we see them in the dark. Since Tolentino had seen this creature in the dark, Radford was wondering if she had subconsciously been seeing the creature as something that it wasn't. Radford discovered that Tolentino had recently seen the science fiction film Species before her report was made. When Radford looked into it, he found Tolentino's description of the Chupacabra to be very similar to the character Syl from the movie. Both have green-gray, reptilian-like skin and spikes protruding from their back. Because of the similarities in their appearance, Radford decided that he couldn't rely on Tolentino's description, believing that she had been influenced by the movie. Even if it wasn't her intention to make the creature's description up, she had clearly been influenced by an outside source. Radford decided to follow a lead to Nicaragua, near the Rio San Juan, where it had been reported that the body of a chupacabra had been found. There had been several sightings of an alleged chupacabra in the area, along with many attacks to follow. With seemingly large amount of activity, Radford decided that this would be the place that he tried to find one for himself. After talking with different cryptozoologists in the area, and learning about the body that was found, which ended up being much smaller than he imagined it to be, he set out on his own investigation and hopefully wanted to capture an image of the elusive Chupacabra. As Radford expected, nothing came of his efforts. He had seen footprints of what people were claiming from a Chupacabra, but this appeared to be a similar situation to Bigfoot. As he initially had thought, there were always footprints and always carnage, but there was never any real solid evidence. At the end of his investigation, Radford wrote a book tracking the Chupacabra, which was published in 2011 and added to his repertoire of over 20 books that he had either written or contributed to, all of which were about urban legends and creatures with similar histories. In his book, Radford talks about all of the research and interviews he had done, his investigation in Nicaragua, and reports that were similar to the 1995 report that he had tracked back to a small town in Puerto Rico called Mocha. The attacks that he had found prior to 1995 were done in 1975, which at the time had been attributed to something the locals called El Vampiro de Mocha, or the Vampire of Mocha. In conclusion, Radford stated that the Chupacabra was just another creature stemming from folklore, something created to explain away something that we don't quite understand, and had further gained momentum with the invention of the internet. While Radford is an independent writer and investigator who speaks about his own opinions and research, there was another source that came forward just a year before his book was published. In 2010, National Geographic published an article about the Chupacabra, stating that they had solved the mystery of the blood-sucking reptilian creature. An alleged Chupacabra body was taken into a lab to be tested for all possible connections to any pre-existing animal, and the results brought them real, solid answers. The body appeared to be that of a coyote, a very emaciated, scaly-skinned version of one anyway. The tests that were ran on the skin of the animal came back positive for, and excuse my pronunciation on this, Sarcoptes scabiei, which, if contracted by humans, is known as scabies. However, in domestic and wild dogs, is called mange. When humans contract scabies, they have mites burrowing under their skin, hunkering down to lay eggs and secrete waste. People with scabies have an inflammatory skin response to the mites, forming an itchy red rash that can be transmitted to other humans as well as animals, dogs being the most susceptible. While people usually feel disgusted and annoyed with scabies, it's not a life-threatening problem to them. However, it's a different story for canines. When dogs contract mange, they begin to get itchy. Their hair starts to fall out and their skin becomes dry, scaly, and patchy. They can form lesions and pustules on the skin, and they become very fatigued. Scientists believe that the reason for coyotes or other wild dogs with mange, which is alleged to be the Chupacabra, were going after livestock because they're an easier, slower-moving target. The wild dogs didn't have enough energy to go after their usual meal of squirrels, prairie dogs, and deer. However, there is one last major question to be answered. Where did all the blood go? The scientists have an explanation for that as well. Exaggeration. They believed that livestock was attacked by coyotes or other wild dogs with mange, but believe that it's an exaggeration when everybody reported that the animals were drained of their blood. What do you all think? Do you believe that there's enough evidence to close the case on the Chupacabra? Do you believe that the attacks are really from wild dogs who had contracted mange, and all the reports that were made were lying about the animals being drained of blood? But what would be the reason to lie about it all? Thank you so much for watching this week's episode of Sketchy Legends. I hope you have enjoyed hearing about the legend of the Chupacabra, or learning more about it if you're already familiar with the creature. In this week's drawing, my little Chupacabra sort of got lost in the background among all the ink strokes, so unfortunately you can hardly see him, but that's kind of almost fitting for the story. However, I was really enjoying this drawing and really wanted to use it in this week's video. If you want to see more of my artwork or see updates on new videos, head on over and follow me on Instagram and Twitter at j_dfiore_art. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a comment and give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.